If you've ever gotten into houseplants, especially the fussy ones, I bet you've heard this piece of advice. Put it on a pebble tray for more humidity. It's one of those bits of wisdom that's just everywhere. But have you ever stopped to wonder if it actually works? Well, we're going to dive in and see what the science really says. So let's talk about that pebble tray, the one you so carefully set up for your prized orchid. Is it actually creating this wonderful, lush, tropical microclimate for your plant? Or, and be honest, is it kind of just a placebo for us, the worried plant parents? Okay, so let's start with why this whole idea even exists. It all boils down to a very simple promise: to fix the huge difference between where our plants want to live and where we actually make them live, in our homes. And this right here, this is the core of the problem. Just look at that contrast. In its natural home, an orchid is chilling in 60% humidity or even higher. But then you bring it inside, and in the winter, when the heat is blasting, that can drop to 10 or 20%. That creates what scientists call a high vapor pressure deficit, which is just a fancy way of saying the air is literally sucking moisture right out of your plant's leaves. So to fight back against this dry, hostile environment, what's the go-to solution we all hear about? It's beautifully simple, super low-tech. It's the humble pebble tray. You see it on the internet, in books. You hear it from other gardeners. They all swear by it. And, the theory behind it seems perfectly logical, right? The thinking goes like this. First, water evaporates from the tray. The pebbles are there to create more surface area, which should speed things up. Second, moist air is less dense than dry air, so naturally, it should rise. And third, this rising, moist air creates a perfect little humid microclimate right around the plant's leaves. It makes perfect sense. Or does it? All right, let's put that neat little theory under the microscope. We're going to see if the physics and, more importantly, the real-world data actually back this whole thing up. Okay, so the science kicks off with something called Dalton's law of evaporation. And basically all it says is that evaporation happens faster when you have more water surface area and drier air. Well, a pebble tray seems to check both of those boxes, doesn't it? The pebbles give you more surface area, and we already know our homes have super dry air. So far, so good. The theory seems to be holding up. So on paper, this looks like a slam dunk. The logic is sound, the physics seems to support it, but the real test, the only one that actually matters to your plant, is what happens when we pull out a device and measure the actual humidity right there, in the air around the leaves. And this, my friends, brings us to the moment of truth. This is where we pit the elegant theory of the pebble tray against the cold, hard, and, well, sometimes disappointing facts of a real-world experiment. And whoa, this chart just lays it all out there. This is the smoking gun. Look at this data. Right at the surface of the pebbles at 0 centimeters, the humidity is a fantastic 65%, awesome. But go up just 2 centimeters, about an inch, maybe where the bottom of the pot is, and it's already plummeted to 42%. By the time you get to the leaves, around 15 centimeters up, it's down to 24%. That's barely any different from the 22% humidity of the rest of the room. And this quote from the research just sums it up perfectly. The pebble tray is doing something. It's giving a nice humidity boost to the very bottom of the pot and maybe a few of those little aerial roots hanging down. But for the leaves and the flowers, the parts we're actually worried about, it provides, and I quote, virtually zero benefit. Ouch. So what is going on here? Why does this promising theory fail so spectacularly in practice? Well, it turns out there are two invisible forces, two culprits, working against our little pebble tray. Our first culprit is a physics concept called the boundary layer. Now, stay with me. In still air, this tiny, invisible layer of air right on top of the water gets completely full of moisture. We're talking 100% saturated. And once that little bubble is full, it's like a shield. It slams the brakes on any more evaporation. The moisture gets trapped just millimeters above the water. And that brings us to culprit number 2, air exchange. See, that little saturated bubble of humidity we just talked about, it is incredibly fragile. The normal air movement in any home, your heating system kicking on, a ceiling fan, heck, even just you walking past, is more than enough to just blow that tiny pocket of moisture away, scattering it into the rest of the room long before it ever has a chance to rise up to your plant. Okay, so we've established the standard pebble tray setup doesn't really live up to the hype. But does that mean you should just chuck it in the bin? Well, not necessarily. Let's get to the final verdict, and more importantly, let's talk about how we can actually fix it. So if you're determined to make a pebble tray work better, you've got to fight back against those two culprits. You need to trap that moisture. So you could enclose the plant in a terrarium or put it on a deep bookshelf. Or try some group therapy. Put a bunch of plants together on one really big tray. You could even upgrade your rocks to something porous, like lava rock, to really max out that surface area. And maybe add a little warm light nearby to encourage more evaporation. But let's be realistic here. Even a souped-up pebble tray is a low-impact, passive solution. If you are really serious about giving your tropical plants the humidity they crave, the high-impact solution is an active device. We're talking about an ultrasonic humidifier. That's something that can actually raise the humidity of the entire room, which, at the end of the day, is what your plant really wants. So, after all this, what's the final verdict? Is the pebble tray a myth? Well, the answer is a little nuanced. Technically, no. It does create a tiny zone of high humidity right at the surface. But practically, for the health of the leaves and the flowers, yeah, it's basically a myth. The helpful zone it creates is just too small to benefit the parts of the plant we're actually trying to help. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? The pebble tray is such a perfect example of a piece of advice that sounds right, it feels right, but when you actually measure it, it just doesn't hold up. It really makes you wonder, what other bits of common wisdom in your own hobbies might be worth taking a closer look at?